Hello, grade 11 learners! Welcome to your senior high school journey. I pray that your senior high school journey be filled with fun and relevant learning experiences. I also wish to welcome you to this episode series on oral communication in context. For this series, I will be uploading videos about your lessons in oral communication in context. So for those who have not yet subscribed to this channel, please subscribe and click the notification bell so that you get updated whenever we have new uploads. As what I've said earlier, we will be focusing on videos relevant to your lessons in oral communication in context. And for this purpose, we'll be using the module on oral communication in context from the Department of Education. And for us to give credit to the crafters and the designers of the learning module, I would like first to acknowledge the development team of the module. The writers of the oral communication in context module are Mark Anthony P. Idang and Ethel D. Dasig. The editors are Marites M. Aguilar and Riza A. Pereira. The reviewers are Liza L. Banayao, Leia C. Villegas, Irma S. Valenzuela, Laila R. Maloles, and Jonathan S. Cadavido. The illustrator is Joseph O. Ocfemia, and the layout artist is Alan E. Medanilia. The management team are Wilfredo E. Cabral, Job S. Zape Jr., Elaine T. Balaugan, Marites A. Ibanez, Ludi N. Pasagi, Eduardo B. Militante, Orlando T. Valverde, Vincent Emmanuel Ilagan, Godofredo C. Mercado, and Henry P. Contemplacion. We have to also give credit to the Department of Education Region 4A, Calabarzon, and of course, the top management of the Department of Education who initiated the crafting of learning modules to be used for the new normal in education. We have, of course, our very own Secretary, Leonor Magpolis Briones, and Undersecretary Diosdado M. San Antonio. So, thank you very much to the development team of the module. And we have to thank them because we have something to use for the new normal in education. So, for now, I would like to read to you the introductory message for the learners because this message is for you, my dear grade 11 learners. Welcome to the Oral Communication in Context 11 Alternative Delivery Mode. The hand is one of the most symbolized parts of the human body. It is often used to depict skill, action, and purpose. Through our hands, we may learn, create, and accomplish. Hence, the hand in this learning resource signifies that you, as a learner, are capable and empowered to successfully achieve the relevant competencies and skills at your own pace and time. Your academic success lies in your own hands. This module was designed to provide you with fun and meaningful opportunities for guided and independent learning at your own leap and speed. You will be enabled to process the contents of the learning resource while being an active learner. But you have to understand that by having this interaction with you, because I have decided to create videos based on the content of the learning modules, at least I would be able to give more inputs and explain the content of the learning modules that I know you are holding at the moment. So for you to more effectively utilize the module you have, I will be giving you a walkthrough on the different parts of the module that you will be using for oral communication in context. So there are parts of the module that you have to know the functions. So first is what I need to know. So for every module that you will be using, especially for oral communication in context, there will be this part which we call what I need to know. And what is the purpose of this portion of the module? This gives you an idea of the skills or competencies you are expected to learn in the module. So what I need to know, my dear learners, would actually contain the most essential learning competencies and the learning objectives that you have to achieve at the end of the module. So why is it important that you know the objectives? Because we want you, our learners, to make these objectives personal. Because the crafters of the modules have based these learning competencies and these objectives from the most essential learning competencies and from the curriculum guides for you to master the different concepts of oral communication in context. When I say you have to make these objectives personal, you have to achieve them on your own. Because the crafters of the module and your teachers have already given you the responsibility to achieve these modules. But of course, we will be here to guide and facilitate you. The second part of the module is what's in. Okay? And this portion is a brief drill or review to help you link the current lesson with the previous one. When you had the face-to-face discussion, we actually call this the motivational activity. So you could actually observe that your teachers used to pose questions, to ask you to give your ideas on particular pictures, or to ask you to accomplish particular activities, because your teachers would like you to see the connection of your previous lessons with the lesson that you are now about to learn. So that is the importance of what's in, because that is where you see the connection of the previous lesson with the lesson that you are about to learn. The next part is what we call what's new. In this portion, the new lesson will be introduced to you in various ways, such through as a story, a song, a poem, a problem opener, an activity, or a situation. Okay? So what's new now is your bridge for you to be able to have an idea on what the next lesson is all about. So it can be presented in many and various forms. Okay? And then we have what is it? So what is it is a portion or a section in your module which provides a brief discussion of the lesson. This aims to help you discover and understand new concepts. So this is the lesson proper. This is where the module gives you an idea of what the lesson is all about. So for example, later on, we'll be talking about the nature and process of communication. So you would be able to see the discussion of this particular lesson in what is it. Okay? In what is it. This is where the lesson will be unfolded, will be discussed to you through the module. But of course, in our context, since I am preparing videos to you, the lessons will be discussed to you through the different videos. But of course, through the guidance of the module that we will be using. Okay? And then we also have this portion which is called What's More. Okay, what's more? And this portion comprises activities for independent practice to solidify your understanding and skills of the topic. You may check the answers to the exercise using the answer key at the end of the module. So you might be asking why the teachers would give us the answer key if they would really want to test how much we learned from the lesson. My dear learners, you have to understand that the answer key will actually help you to check how much you have understood in the lesson. So if you have been checking the answer key before answering the exercises given you, you are doing it in the wrong way. Okay? So the correct manner to answer your module is to first answer the drills and the different activities given you. And then after you do that, you check your answers through the answer key, because this is where you would be able to know how much you have understood the lesson. You should not be cheating and looking into the answer key first before answering your exercises. Okay? Also, we have here the portion which we call what I have learned. In this portion, this portion includes questions that you need to answer so you can process what you have learned from the lesson. So again, these are series of activities and drills. And then, we also have this portion on what I can do. This section provides an activity which will help you transfer your knowledge or skill into real-life situations or concerns. What I can do is a portion which will actually give you the opportunity to apply your learning to real-life situations. Saan kaya sa totoong buhay ko magagamit itong konsepto na napag-aralan ko ngayong araw? That is what I can do allows you to do. And then we have this assessment portion. This assessment is a task which aims to evaluate your level of mastery in achieving the learning competency. So this is now the summative test of the module, of the entire module. You have to understand that for each module, there are lessons. Okay? For each module, there are lessons. And the assessment, my dear learners, is now the evaluation of all the lessons that you have learned in that particular module. Also, we have here additional activities and this portion. Another activity will be given to you to enrich your knowledge or skill of the lesson learned. This also tends retention of learned concepts. Okay? And of course, the answer key would be part of the module. And then you will also see there the references, so that if you want to check these references for more enriched readings, you can check the references used by the crafters of this module. Okay? So now we have reached the first lesson in oral communication in context. So I invite you to look into your module and you can see there what I need to know. Okay, earlier we have said that what I need to know is actually a presentation of the learning competencies and of course the lesson objectives that you have to achieve at the end of the module. So we are in page 2 of your module, my dear learners. So you can actually see there what I need to know. Okay, so it says here, this module was designed and written with you in mind. It is here to help you master the nature, process, and function of communication. The scope of this module permits it to be used in many different learning situations. The language used recognizes the diverse vocabulary level of students. The lessons are arranged to follow the standard sequence of the course. This module consists of one lesson, namely the functions, nature, and process of communication. Again, we will be dealing with the functions, nature, and process of communication. So now these are our learning objectives. After going through this module, you are expected to explain the nature and process of communication, understand the relationship of the functions of communication to everyday life, and to illustrate the process of communication. So you have to bear these objectives in mind because these are the objectives that you have to achieve at the end of this module. So we are now down to lesson number 1. Again, our lesson number 1 for oral communication in context is the nature and process of communication. You have to understand, my dear learners, that communication comes in various forms. From the simple nodding of your head. So how do you nod your head? So you nod like that. From the simple nodding of your head, stretching of your hands, raising your eyebrows. How do you raise your eyebrows? Raising your eyebrows up to your daily conversations with your friends over the phone, constant exchange of text messages. Now we have the chat messages and regular browsing and social networking sites. These are but some examples of how humans communicate their thoughts, feelings, ideas, and insights. These only signify that humans really engage in communication. So from this alone, my dear learners, you have to understand that communication is indeed a process. It is a process by which humans, okay? Of course, animals would also communicate in many and different forms, but the communication we are referring to is the communications used by humans. You have to understand that communication is a process used by humans to express their thoughts, feelings, ideas, and insights. Okay? So it is a manner on how humans express their thoughts, feelings, ideas, and insights. That's communication. And you can actually see a picture in your module. It's a picture of one big happy family. So we have the mother, the father, and of course the siblings in the family. So what is the relevance of this picture? Why is this picture important for you to understand? That particular picture would actually tell you that your coming to your family is a great joy. Your first cry immediately after birth announced your arrival into the world. So your first cry alone is a form of communication because it already sent a message. And the message is that you were already born. Okay? So your first cry immediately after birth announce your arrival into this world. Afterwards, your mother understood that when you cry, you were hungry and gave you milk in response. Because that's the form of communication babies knew, right? So when they cry, either they are hungry or they are wet. And of course, your face also expressed your feelings. When you're sad, when you're happy, those emotions are actually reflected by our facial expressions, correct? And as years passed by, you started pronouncing short words and responded by waving your hands or nodding your head, and most of the times, laughing out loud. Okay? You have to understand that babies would actually coo, and then they start to say monosyllabic words or repetitive words, right? So those are all the forms of communication. And today, you can act out. You can speak and write to tell everyone what you think and feel. So we actually start from the very basics to more complex forms of communication. And these are the ways you communicate. So as we grow, okay, normally, the way we communicate would also progress from crying to starting to utter simple words, and then we were able to utter phrases, sentences, and then now I am sure we can already come up with paragraphs. And then when you exchange ideas with someone or you send information to others, my dear learners, you do it in two ways, right? You do it in two ways. You either use words to say what you want to say or express yourself through gestures and facial expressions. Okay? And these are now what we call the verbal and non-verbal communication. Later on, we'll be dealing more on this, but I already want to give you a little background on verbal and non-verbal communication because these are the two ways you use to communicate. When we speak of verbal communication, it is a communication through the use of words. Okay? It is the communication through the use of words. And verbal communication can be further divided into oral and written communication. So it can be a communication through an oral discourse or a communication through a written discourse. But this oral and written discourse are both called verbal communication. Why? Because they are forms of communications where words are used. Because when we speak, we use words, right? And then when we write, we also use words. The other form is non-verbal communication. When we say non-verbal communication, it is through the use of facial expressions, gestures. Later on, as we progress with our discussions, you would be able to know different types of non-verbal communications. When we communicate through the eyes, okay? Because I understand when we were kids, or when your parents or teachers would actually send you a message like you are noisy in the classroom or you are noisy in the house and there is a visitor, your parents would just stare at you like that, and you understand the message that you have to stop what you're doing, right? That form of non-verbal communication through the use of your eyes is called oculesics. Okay, it's called oculesics. We also have communication that focuses on space, that's proxemics. And then we have communication through the use of touch, that's haptics. Later on, we'll be dealing more on this on when we reach that portion in our discussion, particularly on the difference between verbal and non-verbal communication. But at least I have already given you a background on these forms of communication, right? Humans are social beings. That's correct. Because we always communicate. We do communicate every day. We live to interact regularly with others. That's correct. In fact, our endurance is due to our ability to express ourselves and to connect to one another and the world we live in. Okay? That's true that we are social beings, that we humans are social beings. When we look back into the history of humankind, my dear learners, we will find that early man could not speak as we do today. Okay? Can you just imagine the caveman or the ancestors we had? Definitely they were not able to speak the way we do now. Okay? Records show that people have used various communication techniques such as the use of symbols, gestures, sounds, drawings, and sign languages. Words and languages developed much later in human history. If we also trace back to the history of communication, there was a particular era in the history where our letters were sent through pigeons or birds, right? Or if we're going to compare how we send letters in the past and how we send letters today, we would actually see the difference because now we have email. In the past, they would still use horses or pigeons or birds for them to be able to send their letters. Today, we don't use them anymore. In the past, for a particular tribe to notify other people that there is a particular group in that place, they use smoke. Okay? They use smoke to send a message that hey, we're here, we are living here, this is our place. They send smoke. But this time, there are so many ways that we can send our message and communicate our message to people. Over the years, communication has progressed tremendously. That's true. Language developed side by side with technology. Now, in the 21st century, we realize the power of communication in building relationships and the community at large. Hence, we see the importance of communication. Is it not? Today, we have different social media platforms. We have Facebook, we have Twitter, we have Instagram, where we can express our feelings, thoughts, and ideas, and where other people could actually communicate with us as well. right? The social media platforms are very useful, particularly to build relationships. In the past, when a family member decides to go abroad to work as an OFW or an overseas Filipino worker, the manner they used to communicate is through letters, right? They write a letter now addressed to their family members in the Philippines, and then that letter would be received in weeks or in a month or two, right? But today we can communicate with our loved ones abroad real time through the different applications or social media platforms we have. We have Zoom, we have Skype few years ago, and then now we have the Messenger where we can also have video calls, right? So these technology have helped build more on relationships we have with people. All right? So now we will proceed to what is it, okay? What communication and why do we communicate? We have been discussing this earlier, but of course, to intensify our discussion on communication, you have to understand that communication is a two-way process of connecting to both living and non-living things. It is also a means of sharing and exchanging messages, information, ideas, feelings for mutual understanding. Okay? That's the definition given by Gregorium JC 2015. Communication connects people and the world they live in. It is through communication that people are able to express their thoughts and ideas or convey information and messages through word of mouth, oral, so that's verbal, gestures and signals, signs and others, so that's nonverbal communication. People have always communicated with one another in various forms. That's true because even when you drive, you use nonverbal cues, right? Because when you are about to turn to the right or turn to the left, you use your light, you use your signal light to let the driver following you know where you're going to, right? So that's a form of nonverbal communication. And the lines we have on the roads are also nonverbal cues, which we have to obey for us to always arrive to our destinations safely, right? So these are nonverbal cues which send messages. Okay? So, communication is a message understood. Of course, the very purpose of communication is for us to create understanding. So, communication is a message understood. Unless a message is understood, we cannot say that communication has taken place. That's correct. Because that's the main purpose of communication, understanding. Let us send a message to someone and say, where came first? The person who gets this message would wonder what it means, for the arrangement of the words does not make any sense. Again, the phrase is, where came first? So if somebody told you where came first, would you understand that? Definitely not, right? So in that case, if you were not able to understand what came first means, communication did not take place. Okay? Communication did not take place because there was no understanding. The message is sent, but the receiver does not understand it. Therefore, for communication to take place, we have to consider two conditions. And what are these conditions? Number one, my dear learners, is there should be a clear message, clarity of message. And number two, the message must be understood by the receiver for whom it is meant. Okay? For whom it is meant. That is, communication is a message understood. So, communication creates understanding. Number two, communication is social interaction through messages. Think of someone telling you, it is very warm today. In this case, we are communicating what we experience. The weather being warm is what we feel or experience physically. In this scenario, we are sharing our feeling or experience with someone else. Thus, we may say that communication is a sharing experience. In our society, we all interact with messages. Without interactions, a society cannot survive. Social interaction is always through messages. Right? Because we discuss problems and arrive at solutions. What if you were able to detect a problem? Okay, and we did not talk about it. Do you think we would be able to solve the problem? Definitely not. We exchange ideas and interact with others. We transact and we negotiate. In doing all these, we use communication. Imagine a situation where we are not able to speak and interact with others, or think of a family living in the same house without speaking to each other or relating any form of message to one another. Can you just imagine a family not conversing, not talking to one another? I think that's not a family at all. Such situation can be very lonely and problematic. Paano kayo tatawagin ng nanay nyo kung hindi kayo mag-uusap? Paano kayo sasabihan ng nanay nyo na kakain na kung hindi kayo mag-uusap? Without even sign language. See? That's really problematic. Without communication, all forms of human relationships will vanish and die. Communication is therefore crucial in building and maintaining relationships. Kaya siguro sinasabi nila na pag may mga taong, for example, magjowa at nagsisigawan sila ng nagsisigawan kasi nag-aaway sila, nagsisigawan sila na nagsisigawan kasi hindi na sila nagkakaintindihan. So they were not able to maintain relationships anymore. But when lovers do not shout at each other, kahit hindi yan mag-usap, magkakaintindihan yan. Because even when they don't speak, their hearts would understand. Ganda nun. Napaka-drama. Char. Okay? So this time, we move to the communication process. Okay? This time, we move to the communication process. There are times when we fail to communicate adequately and experience misunderstanding and miscommunication. Why do you think this happens? Okay, bakit kaya? Bakit kaya may mga pagkakataon na we do not understand one another or we fail to communicate adequately? And how do we avoid such? We are sometimes misunderstood by the level of speech we use during conversation, by the volume or rate we talk with friends or acquaintances. We may sometimes be misunderstood by the nonverbal actions that we project or incorporate in our speech when we talk face-to-face with people. Also, when we send text or chat messages, we are misinterpreted because those messages are often brief and devoid of emotion. Kung nireplyan mo siya ng K, pero nung nag-reply ka, ang pagkakasabi mo naman, K, ganun mo siya ni-reply ha, K. Pero nung binasa niya, ang pagkabasa niya, K. So there would be miscommunication, right? Even if it's not your intention to be read that way na K, ganun niya binasa, kahit ang intention mo sana ay K. Di ba may K. Those are instances when we do not communicate adequately. Okay? Those are instances. So we have to understand that these are barriers to communication. Okay? These are barriers to communication. And the barriers of communication, my dear learners, are the ones that block the communication process. Okay? Barriers of communications are the ones that block the communication process. One example of a barrier to communication is physical barrier. Okay, physical barrier. For example, I am here and I am communicating with somebody 1 kilometer away. Okay, who is located 1 kilometers away from me. Okay? Ang sabi siguro niya, we. Sabi niya siguro, no? Or nasa stage pala siya, tapos nagde-deliver siya ng oration, ng oratorical piece. Tapos ang sabi niya, we. Dahil sa layo, nung tinahak nung message niya, ang nakarating na lang sa akin, So, walang understanding. So, that physical space is a barrier. That physical space is a barrier to communication. Diba? Or another barrier to communication is language. Or like, I speak Ibanag, and then he speaks Ilocano, and then he or she doesn't understand Ibanag. Okay? Ang sabi ko, ang baho ng taki mo. Ang baho ng taki mo. Referring to paa, right? Because taki in Ibanag is paa. But taki in Ilocano is tae, right? So, that would be language barrier. There is barrier to communication in that particular context, right? So, later on, we will be discussing more on barriers to communication. Our everyday transactions with people follow the communication process. Okay? So, again, we are talking about the communication process. When we say process, it has to undergo a particular steps, right? It has to undergo particular steps because it's a process. Communication is a process. That's something that you have to always remember. And then, you have to always understand that the communication process, my dear learners, always starts with a response to the stimulus. When we speak of a stimulus in the communication process, it is the reason why we have to communicate. Because it's funny that we keep communicating when we do not have a purpose, right? The stimulus, my dear friends, is our purpose. Okay? That is where the communication process starts. Okay? The stimulus is the conception of the communication process. It is where the communication process starts. And then, who responds to the stimulus? The one who responds to the stimulus is the sender. Okay? The sender. You can actually see this in the module. There is an illustration in your module. Okay, let me guide you. There is actually an illustration in your module. That's page 5 of your module. Okay? That's page 5 of your module. So, you go to page 5. So, the stimulus is the reason, and the one who actually responds to the stimulus is the sender. Okay? The sender, because the sender has the purpose in initiating the communication process. The sender encodes the message. So when we say encode, the sender formulates the idea or the message that he wants to express. The message is still one of the elements of communication. So we now have 3. The stimulus, the sender, the message, and of course, the encoding of the message. These are elements, okay? These are elements of communication. Now, what does the sender do? The sender finds a manner on how to express the message. So, it can be through oral, it can be through a text message, it can be through sign language or others. The choice that the sender will decide to use is now called the channel. The channel is the one that transmits the message to the receiver. Okay? The channel is the one that transmits the message to the receiver. The receiver of the message decodes the message. The receiver decodes the message and, of course, understands the message. And if the receiver was able to understand the message and wishes to respond back to the sender, the response is now what we call the feedback. Okay? The response is now what we call the feedback. And the environment where the communication is taking place is now what we call the context. Okay? It's now what we call the context. And within that context are barriers to communication. It can be physical barrier, psychological, physiological barriers, language barrier. Those barriers are just within the context of communication. What the interlocutors is what we call the receiver and the sender. What the interlocutors have to do is to make sure to make the communication process succeed by avoiding these barriers. Okay? By avoiding these barriers. In your module, you can also see there the different functions of communication, but we will have a separate discussion on the functions to communication. So, yun muna for this video. Yun muna ang pag-uusapan natin. Those are the things that we have to do first. So, we have defined communication. We have also discussed the different functions and importance of communication. And of course, we have discussed the different elements and the communication process. Again, the communication process starts with the stimulus, and then the encoding of the message by the sender, the transmission of the message through the channel, and then the decoding of the message through the receiver, and then the giving of the feedback of the receiver to the sender. Okay, and all this happens within the environment, which is what we call the communication context. Okay, so this time, my dear learners, I encourage you to answer the different activities in your module. So that's video number 1, and we were able to discuss our lesson number 1 for oral communication in context. Thank you very much for joining me in this video. If you like this video, please show me some love by liking the video. You may also tell your friends that we have started this episode series on oral communication in context. So see you again next time when I'll be uploading new videos about your lessons in oral communication in context. So again, I am Mr. Jan Boltong. I am a senior high school teacher, obviously. I'm a senior high school teacher. I am teaching oral communication in context. So for those who have not yet subscribed to this channel, please subscribe to this channel and of course click the notification bell. And thank you very much and see you again next time. Bye-bye!